Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 32nd annual presentation of the Henry L. Stimson Medal. For those of you who have attended this event in years past, you already notice one dramatic difference. I am not Mark Heller. I will never be Mark Heller. Mark, my friend and law firm partner, has retired from practice, and after serving as part of the New York City Bar Association's Stimson Medal Committee for 32 years, Mark has passed the Stimson torch. We all know that Ken Jennings will never really replace Alex Trebek. And Ryan Seacrest will never really replace Dick Clark or Pat Sajak. So too, I could never replace Mark Heller. But the bar and the many of us who have benefited from Mark's commitment, insight, and wisdom over these last 3 decades are grateful for his dedication to the Stimson Medal program and his successful efforts to make this one of the most special nights of the year. Mark, thank you. And in his honor, we will carry on. My name is Rich Donoghue. I am the current chair of the Stimson Medal Committee here at the Bar Association, and like Mark, I'm a partner at the firm Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, the firm that sponsors the Stimson Medal program and tonight's event. This is a very special night. It marks the 32nd time that the City Bar Association has honored the men and women of the U.S. Attorney's offices in the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York for their outstanding dedication, their sacrifices, and their exemplary service, not only to the people of the city of New York, but to the nation. We do this by honoring 2 AUSAs from each of the offices, one each from the civil and criminal divisions. Recipients are selected for upholding the traditions of excellence and integrity established by Henry L. Stimson. He served as United States Attorney in this city well over a century ago. First, it's my honor to introduce tonight's speakers and winners. Our keynote speaker is the Honorable Richard J. Sullivan, Circuit Court Judge of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. More from Judge Sullivan momentarily. Our presenter tonight is the 71st President of the New York City Bar Association, Mohammed U. Faridi. President Faridi. And tonight's award recipients are from the Eastern District of New York, Doug Pravda and Katie Mahoney. And from the Southern District of New York, Christine Schessler-Pascablo and Marcia Cohen. Now, because our date conflicted with the U.S. Attorney's Conference in Washington, D.C., unfortunately, we do not have our U.S. attorneys with us. But we have the people who really actually make things happen in the office. So we have First Assistant from the EDNY, Carolyn Picorni. And from the SDNY, Deputy U.S. Attorney Ed Kim. Thank you both for that. We also have a number of judges, former U.S. attorneys, prior recipients of tonight's award. I know I saw Judge Deary here. In the interest of time, please consider yourselves acknowledged. Thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to provide just a brief background on the Stimson Medal. The medal was initiated by the Bar Association in 1992, and it honors the memory of Henry L. Stimson, who was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 1906 to 1909. Stimson later continued his distinguished career in public service, serving as a Secretary of War under 3 presidents, Taft, FDR, and Truman, and as Secretary of State under President Hoover. Stimson was appointed to the U.S. Attorney position as part of a wave of Teddy Roosevelt reformers. He inherited an office where the U.S. Attorney's salary had just been cut from $100,000 a year to $10,000 a year. I'm sure Mrs. Stimson was thrilled. He had 8 assistants who made between $750 and $1,500 per year, a paltry sum even in those days. One of his first, and I should note that most of those assistants treated it as a part-time job. One of Stimson's first edicts was requiring his lawyers to come to the office every day. Oh, the horror. Any important litigation matters in the office were outsourced to private attorneys, as it was understandably presumed that marginally competent government lawyers could never stand up to the giants of the bar that represented wealthy individuals and corporations. But in a little more than 3 years, Stimson transformed that office and set the model for all U.S. attorneys' offices. He replaced politically connected assistants with poorly paid but talented, public-minded young lawyers. He did so by offering the opportunity to handle the office's most important cases and by impressing upon them the satisfaction of public service. He used new statutes passed by Congress to prosecute major corporate wrongdoers, like the New York Central Railroad and the American Sugar Company, as well as executives of prominent companies. Perhaps most characteristically, as the U.S. Attorney, he personally tried the most challenging cases brought by his office. In a few short years, Stimson created a legacy characterized by integrity, hard work, contempt for corruption, tenacious investigations, and meticulous trial preparation. The standards of excellence on which he insisted remain the hallmark of the offices today in both the Southern and Eastern districts of New York, and it is that tradition that we honor today. The award itself was created in 1992 by Ted Clark, a Pillsbury partner, who served as the New York City Bar Association president, who had the honor of working with Henry Stimson as a young associate in the law firm Winthrop, Stimson, Putnam Roberts, predecessor to today's Pillsbury Winthrop firm. The purpose of the award is to promote the principles that Henry Stimson insisted upon as a United States Attorney. Those principles, which are the criteria for determining the award recipients, are absolute integrity, candor and fairness in dealing with adversaries in the court, outstanding contributions to public service, highly developed professional skills, and personal courage and conviction. The medal itself is created especially for this award, and it is cast from a sculpture by Paul Manship that is owned by the Century. Current members of the Bar Association Stimson Committee are Bar President Faridi, Executive Director Brett Parker, Richard Hahn, a partner at Morrison Cohen, and my friend and partner Carolyn Fornos at Pillsbury. We thank them all for their work this year. I would be remiss if I did not thank former New York City Bar Association President Susan Coleman for her support of the Stimson program over many years. The selections are based on nominations from the U.S. attorneys, and given the quality of the nominees presented each year, this is an incredibly difficult task. Each nominee can justly claim extraordinary accomplishment. Now, at this point in the proceeding, Mark had a tradition of going through a list of some of the most prominent Stimson Medal recipients from years past. Mark, this is where we break from tradition. With one exception, I will not go through that list, but I would note that it is prominently displayed on the New York City Bar Association's website, and trust me when I tell you, it is an august group, and that they have done incredible work. So you are now left to wonder, who is this particularly extraordinary sole past recipient of the Stimson Medal who warrants specific mention tonight? Well, it's my distinct honor to introduce and welcome our keynote speaker, the Honorable Richard J. Sullivan, Circuit Judge of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, former District Judge of the Southern District of New York, former AUSA in the Southern District, of New York, and I might add, a 2003 recipient of the Henry L. Stimson Medal. Judge Sullivan is a graduate of Yale Law School, the College of William and Mary, and Chaminade High School. And Judge, I mention that because I know how you Chaminade graduates feel about that. Following his graduation from law school, Judge Sullivan clerked for the Honorable David M. Bell of the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, and worked as an associate at Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen, Katz. From 1994 to 2005, he served as an assistant United States attorney in the Southern District of New York, and he has proof, if any of you want to challenge that, because he has a binder full of photographs of his general crimes and narcotics days. He served there as the chief of the International Narcotics Trafficking Unit and director of the New York, New Jersey Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Thereafter, he served for several years as the general counsel and managing director of Marsh, Inc., the world's leading risk management and insurance brokerage firm. Judge Sullivan then served for 11 years as a United States District Judge in the Southern District of New York. In October 2018, Judge Sullivan was sworn in as a United States Circuit Court Judge for the Second Circuit. Judge Sullivan's experience as an AUSA in private practice and as both a trial and appellate judge make him uniquely qualified to speak about the qualities that make outstanding Assistant United States Attorney. Please join me in welcoming Judge Sullivan to the podium.
Well, thank you very much. I will say I did not need these 21 years ago when I was here. But this is also an anniversary of sorts that even goes back farther for me. 30 years ago this week, I was sworn in as an Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I had applied to both districts and did not presume I would get an offer at either and would have accepted any. And it looked like Eastern might be the one. They brought me in first, and I went all the way up to Zach Carter, the U.S. Attorney, and I don't know, maybe he didn't like me. But Southern caught up, and before I knew it, I had been offered the job by Mary Jo White, then the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan. I don't remember much about that swearing in. I do remember, I think, that Marjorie Feinstein was there. We were in general crimes together. But what I do remember is something that Mary Jo White said, and it was this. She said, "This is the best job you will ever have. It's also the hardest job you'll ever have." 30 years later, after 11 years as a prosecutor, I think I can say that she was right on both scores. The job turned out to be far more interesting and challenging, far more impactful, and ultimately satisfying than I ever could have imagined. And my expectations were very high, believe me. For 11 years, I got up every morning looking forward to going to work. And just about every night, I had to tear myself away thinking I could do 2 more hours of this and still enjoy it. It was that kind of a job. It was that compelling. But it was a hard job. I mean, I have to say that the responsibility that comes with being an Assistant U.S. Attorney is staggering and sometimes intimidating. Robert Jackson, the U.S. Attorney General, was also a Supreme Court Justice and then later the lead prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials that Henry L. Stimson basically was instrumental in formulating. Jackson once said that the prosecutor has more control over life, liberty, and reputation than any person in America. I think that is true. It is a very heavy burden to carry as a young prosecutor. I think I speak for everybody up here. When there are times when you think, I don't know that I'm up to this. But of course, they are and were. And of course, one thing to remember is that as an Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern and Southern Districts of New York, you never do this job alone. You have the benefit of supervisors and colleagues and U.S. attorneys who teach you the right way to do things. But more than that, you stand on the shoulders of generations of prior Assistant U.S. Attorneys and supervisors and U.S. attorneys who provide the model of what this job should be and can be and must be. And all of that goes back to Henry Stimson. It's something that I don't think I knew when I got this award. It's something that I've now become very, very aware of in the years since. Stimson, as you heard, he inherited an office that was evolving, but certainly not what it is today. And he was tasked with two things. First, reorganize this office, remake it. And that meant recruiting new people, a different kind of lawyer. Not on the basis of politics, not on the basis of cronyism, on the basis of ability. They also had to be cheap, because he couldn't afford what high-priced partners at law firms were making. And so he went to the firms that looked for the juniors. And he went to law schools and looked for people fresh out of law school, people like Felix Frankfurter. And he enticed them with the responsibility that comes with doing the work of a government lawyer. And that was enough for them. He remade the office, and it has never been the same since. But the other thing he was tasked with doing was making impactful cases. At the time, the biggest threat to law, the rule of law, was the trusts, the big corporate trusts. Congress had passed laws, but the U.S. Attorney's Office had had great difficulty enforcing those laws against very powerful corporations. And that was the mission of Stimson. Make impactful cases against these largest of organizations who otherwise will make the whole notion of rule of law a mockery. That's a lot of pressure for a very junior office of 8 AUSAs, and yet they delivered. I mean, the cases then you heard a little bit, I mean, he brought basically cases against railroads, large trusts involving sugar, including something called the Licorice Trust, which sounds kind of quaint, but I guess it was a real thing. It was the Elkins Act, and he enforced it. Now, there's some things he didn't do. There are kinds of cases that he didn't bring. He never brought a case involving organized crime. There was no such thing as a racketeering law, and really it would be decades before racketeering organizations became a scourge to the national interest. He never brought a securities case. There were no securities laws in 1906 to 1909. He never brought cases against La Cosa Nostra, of course, Al-Qaeda, and the threat of international terrorism were things that were unheard of at the time. But he created an ethic in these offices that they were to look and find the most important cases and the largest threats to the United States and to the rule of law. And every generation was tasked with finding what that was and reorganizing to address it. And that is the ethic of the office, I think, that still exists. In many ways, I think to be a prosecutor today is a lot harder than it was when I started in this. Certainly probably harder than when Stimson started in this business. The nature of international organized crime is unlike anything he could have imagined. The nature of technology to make that possible makes it truly difficult to be a prosecutor and try to keep up with the evidence and keep up with these organizations that can impose tremendous hardship on institutions and individuals. I do think that the nature of electronic information gathering makes it very difficult to be an AUSA. When I was an AUSA, most people had what was in their pockets. Maybe you do a search warrant and get a few filing cabinets. Now everybody is walking around with a supercomputer. And that means that you have to be able to analyze it, go through it, produce it, find what might be exculpatory, all in short order so you can have a meaningful and speedy trial right. That is daunting, and the mistakes, if they are made, can be reputation harming, no question about it. But also they can undermine confidence in our system of justice. And so these are real challenges that AUSAs face today. I do think they're up to it. I get to see them in court still, which is one of the great privileges of this job. And I think Stimson would be very impressed at the quality of the lawyers who make up these two offices. They are very much like the people that he hired over 120 years ago, with a couple of exceptions. One is that it's, if anything, a much broader pool that we're drawing from now. Women and people from walks of life who never would have had a shot at being an assistant U.S. attorney 100 years ago, now have access to this office to serve nobly and well in the best traditions of Stimson and those who follow. So that's, I think, a great advancement on Stimson. I will say there are things that are still being learned from Stimson. I guess I'll give a little bit of advice to you folks here and to you folks out there, because I know that many of you are AUSAs still doing this important work. I would say the first thing to remember is that you are charged with making an impact. You are not a district attorney's office that basically has to respond to cases as they come in. You have the ability to control an investigation. And so it means you're not to passively investigate or passively prosecute a case that has been brought to you by an agent. It's your responsibility to take that case and to partner with that agent to make it something profound, to make this the most impactful case it can be. That is something that not every U.S. Attorney's Office can boast of. They don't have those resources, but in the Eastern and Southern Districts of New York, you do. And you must. That's what is expected of you. The other thing to remember, I think, is that we live in a time where institutions are being challenged. When I started, an FBI agent was money on the stand. Everybody would trust an FBI agent. But now, I'm not so sure. I think that there are a lot of jurors who might be skeptical. And it's your job as an AUSA every day in every case to make sure that the jury and the judge and the people who have interactions with the court have confidence in what you're doing, that you are dispassionate, that you are honest, that you are careful, and that you are rigorous. That is what builds a reputation for fairness and for justice. That is what the Department of Justice stands for, and the Eastern District and Southern District of New York truly stand for. Another thing to remember, I think, is competition can be a good thing. We're the only city in America that has 2 United States Attorney's offices. The truth. And this is a vestige from when these offices were created. In the 1870s, we had 2 cities. We had New York and Brooklyn. Each had its own U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, in 1898, they merged. 5 boroughs were created, Greater New York created, but we didn't merge those offices. And I think that was a good thing. I have to say, I think I was made to be a better AUSA every day because I knew that right across the river, there were a group of AUSAs, including Carolyn Picorni, who's here, and many others who were on that Stimson list, who, if they worked harder than I was, they would get those cases. They would get those agents. They would be able to make impactful cases. And that inspired me to be the best that I could be. Mary Jo White, who hired me, was famous for sending in manila envelopes just to the unit chief articles she would have torn out of the paper, not even cut out, just torn out of the Post or Daily News. And invariably would have a little highlighting to show, in Brooklyn yesterday, the U.S. Attorney announced the indictment of 12 important narcotics kingpins. No notes, no anything. And I remember thinking, you know, they have an office, they have 2 airports, they have a lot of good assistants, but that wasn't her point. Her point, I don't think, was that she was surprised that the Eastern District could make cases. Her point was, are you working as hard as they are? Are you going to make the difference that they seem to be making in this case? Are you working as hard as you can? Are you providing the leadership that you must? Are you forging the relationships with agencies so that we can make these impactful cases? Mary Jo White every year would give out an award. She called the Above and Beyond Award, and it was a globe made of glass, a crystal globe. And she said, that's our jurisdiction. Just remember that. Everything comes through New York. Venue is never a problem. If it's an important issue in the world, we can make that case. And usually she was right. And the same was true of the Eastern District. I mean, there was no reason why you couldn't bring a case there that you could bring here and vice versa. But I think that competition brought out the best in both districts. And I think it's a good thing to remember as you look across the aisle here and as you look across the river, to remember that you have a great example of what Stimson was talking about and what mattered to him. And so inspiration is a good thing. I'm inspired to look at all of you today and to read about your exploits. It really is impressive. I would say one last thing before I sit down and let the honorees take the spotlight, and it is, I guess, this. One thing to remember about this job is that your targets, your defendants, are human beings too. They're your fellow citizen. They're your fellow human beings. And it's important to always remember that this is a person who is worthy of respect and courtesy and even kindness. It doesn't mean you shirk on the responsibilities of enforcing the law and prosecuting fairly and justly. It doesn't mean that at all. All too often, many prosecutors today, particularly at the local level, think that not prosecuting is more noble than prosecuting. And I'm not suggesting that you go easy on people. I am suggesting, however, that you remember that each of these people will be mourned by someone and that their loss will be felt by someone. And I think that the best traditions of both offices is that understanding. There was always an understanding at hiring that the U.S. Attorney, and we have Ray Deary here so he knows, that the U.S. Attorney was interested in making sure that the person hired for this job was not so gung-ho that they would go after people blindly. It was a person who had humility, who worried about the consequences and thought about the impact of what they were doing. That's a noble sentiment, and it's an important one to always carry with you, no matter how long you're doing this job. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about is friendship and family. Stimson talked about the friendships, the relationships he forged in those 3 years as U.S. Attorney as one of the high points of his career. And I look out among you, and I look at my photos. I gave Marcia was in General Crimes when I was the chief, and I looked at those photos, and I just think, wow, these are the friendships of a lifetime. And that is what makes this job so special, is that you work with colleagues who not only are incredibly talented and incredibly hardworking, but they are generous and thoughtful and people that you admire. And that means more when you're working in the public good towards a public objective. There's something about that that can't be replicated at a firm or any place else. And I think that is one of the things that Stimson held most dear and why he always referred to his time at the U.S. Attorney's Office as the most precious of time. And the last thing I'll talk about is family. This is a hard job on a family. This is not a 9-to-5 job. This is a job that demands a lot of you at all times and hours of the day. And even when you're home, you're sometimes thinking in someplace else. And so it's good that many of you brought your families here so that they can see you being honored and so that you can also acknowledge them, because they are responsible for everything you've achieved as well. I was here 21 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. My twin girls are in the back in a stroller. They were 6 months old. And my wife was here, and I remember I could not have done any of this without her, because she's the one who said, you got to do it. This is important work. You have to do it. At every step along the way, when a judgeship became possible, she didn't say, no, playtime's over. We got to make some money. She said, you can't say no to this. This is too important an opportunity. But my girls were 6 months old, quiet as church mice. They were great. And they're here today. I wanted them to be here today to see this, so that, because I missed it last time. They were kind of not really paying attention. They're now 21, and I hope that they will come away recognizing whatever they do in life, I hope that they will find colleagues and a calling that means as much to them as being in part of the U.S. Attorney's Office meant to me, and as much as it means to all of them. So this is a proud day for this district and for the Eastern District, for this Bar Association. I really want to say thank you. You know, all of us, every lawyer in America, every lawyer in this room has taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not just prosecutors, not just judges, not just defense lawyers who work at the federal defenders. Everybody does that. We all have a responsibility to make these institutions stronger and better than we found them. Right now is a challenging time. I think the most challenging time in my lifetime for the institutions of justice that I hold dear and that I respect so much. But I am really confident that with talented people like these and with all of us, we can make that difference. And so I hope that you'll continue the great work that you're doing. And remember, this is a noble cause. The true administration of justice, as George Washington once said, is the firmest pillar of good government. Really a wonderful thing to be a part of. So, thank you very much, and congratulations on you.
Thank you, Judge Sullivan. Okay. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the 71st President of the City Bar Association, Faridi, who will make the Stimson Medal presentations this evening. Besides being a long-standing active member of the City Bar Association, Mr. Faridi is a litigation partner at Patterson, Belknap, Webb & Tyler, where he handles high-stakes, complex commercial litigation. In the last 2 years alone, he has tried 5 cases. I think Stimson was quite approving. Mr. Faridi also serves as the independent civilian representative to the New York City Police Department's and Shoe Committee, which regulates NYPD policies and practices regarding investigations of political activity. He previously served on the New York City Mayor's Advisory Committee on the Judiciary. Here at the City Bar, he has previously served as the association's Vice President, Chair of the Executive Committee, Chair of its Committee on Capital Punishment, and Co-Chair of the Committee on Recruitment and Retention of Lawyers. Please join me in welcoming the New York City Bar President.
I want to begin by thanking Judge Sullivan for those wonderful, wonderful remarks, and also by expressing our gratitude to Mark for your 3 decades of service on this really important committee. Thank you for your service. And I want to thank the firm of Pillsbury Winthrop for maintaining this joyful celebration on an annual basis to celebrate the achievement of public interest. I was particularly looking forward to tonight's event because I wanted to meet the stars of the Eastern and Southern districts and see the names that will likely become as familiar as many of those who previously received this particular award. Those are the luminaries and the legends of the bar and of the profession. When the City Bar Association launched this particular medal program 30 years ago, it was decided that the medal would honor and celebrate the following 4 attributes of AUSAs: integrity, fairness, courage, and public service. Each one of you exemplifies each of these 4 attributes. You are honest, sincere, impartial, brave, have a zeal for the public interest. One attribute that is especially worth highlighting tonight, given the times that we live in, is courage. Your dedication to doing the right thing, regardless of the political consequences, and regardless of the threats of violence and intimidation. You are an embodiment to the rule of law. You are the people who make the wheels of justice work, people who operate in good faith, do the right thing, and adhere to the principles of fairness and equality. I am especially pleased to see the recipients of the medal joined by their family members and friends and colleagues tonight. It is essential to take a moment to acknowledge the support that you all have provided to our honorees. There is no doubt in my mind that your encouragements during challenging times and your steadfast presence and support have made the successes of our honorees possible. And we also must acknowledge those who couldn't be with us today. Though they may not be physically present, the influence remains woven into the fabric of our award recipients' good work. And with that, I'm honored to present the Henry L. Stimson medals. We have 2 recipients from the Eastern District and 2 from the Southern District. Even though I'm impartial to Brooklyn, having grown up there and having clerked in Brooklyn, I wish I can say that we're deciding to honor the Brooklyn AUSAs first because of my partiality. But I was told by Mark that the tradition is that we begin with Brooklyn, the Eastern District rather, before moving on to the Southern District. So the first recipient tonight is Kathleen Mahoney. Kathleen is a graduate of Fordham College and St. John's University School of Law. After law school, she was in private practice for a few years, and followed by 9 years with the Department of Health and Human Services and 3 years at the Social Security Administration. Kathleen joined the Eastern District in 1998. Since then, she has handled a wide variety of challenging matters in both affirmative and defensive practice areas with outstanding results. Let me just highlight 3 examples. United States versus VNAB, where Kathleen not only successfully defended a Medicare payment claim, but also filed counterclaims under the False Claims Act and ended up recovering millions of dollars for the U.S. government And she was honored for that particular, for that work with a Director's Award for Superior Performance. And there's a matter involving a Superfund site in Bethpage that was formerly a manufacturing facility of Northrop Grumman. Kathleen mastered a decades-long evidentiary record in complex environmental laws and regulations to secure a $35 million cleanup settlement from the company for the U.S. Navy. Just one more example, Rodriguez versus Raimondo, a case involving national security and environmental law, where Kathleen successfully defended a decision of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to override New York State's objection to dredging required to support submarine construction in a Connecticut shipyard. And after mastering a 33,000-page administrative record, Kathleen filed a summary judgment motion that was so compelling that it led New York State to drop the suit. Perhaps no area better exemplifies Kathleen's versatility and record of success than appeals. She has won all 29 appeals she has handled, 18 of which she argued before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. She has managed the Eastern District Social Security docket, the office's largest defensive practice with as many as 500 cases per year, supervised the office's handling of cases involving the Medicare program, and has become a subject matter expert in large bankruptcy cases. He has held numerous key supervisory positions in the Eastern District. He has overseen the Civil Division's extensive training program. He has mentored scores of AUSAs, handling complex issues and cases, and significantly enhanced the quality and sophistication of the civil practice in the Eastern District. Kathleen is a dedicated public servant, an exceptional colleague, who has consistently made meaningful contributions throughout her legal career, including during more than 26 years as an AUSA. Kathleen's exemplary career and commitment to public service make her a worthy recipient of the medal. Please join me in congratulating Kathleen. We're waiting for the camera, so just bear with us. Want to begin your remarks?
Oh, never mind. I'll need to do that. We can pose that.
Judge Sullivan, other esteemed judges, President Faridi, Stimson Committee Chair Donoghue, colleagues, former colleagues, and friends. Thank you to the New York City Bar Association and the Stimson Committee for selecting me for this prestigious honor. Thank you to my U.S. Attorney, Brianne Peace, for nominating me, and I'll add Carolyn to that since she's here tonight. Congratulations to the other award recipients, especially Doug, who does such important work and is one of the nicest attorneys in the office. This speech is one of the most difficult assignments I have faced. Not the public speaking part, but rather deciding what to say. There are no guidelines. There's no specific point that must be made, as there would be if I were writing a brief or preparing for an oral argument. I had thought that whatever I came up with would be okay. After all, I've attended countless of these ceremonies and do not remember anybody's speeches. But then, yesterday evening, they told me this was being recorded. I have been very fortunate throughout my legal career, my jobs, my coworkers, my mentors, and doing interesting work. During my 26.5 years in the office, I've been privileged to represent the United States and its agencies in all kinds of cases and matters, ranging from simple and routine to complex and challenging. To a large extent, I've been given autonomy. The variety of legal matters on which I have worked and am working keeps me engaged and motivates me to come to work. I've remained a generalist, working on both defensive and affirmative matters. They require many of the same skills to make the case effectively: knowing the law, assessing the strengths of your arguments, determining what evidence you need to support your claims or defenses, getting that evidence, reviewing documents, which I love doing, and evaluating witnesses' credibility and reliability. I like to think that I've successfully applied these skills to almost all subject areas, ranging from Social Security litigation, a practice area I supervised for 16 years, to torts and Bivens, to employment discrimination, to Medicare reimbursement, to bankruptcy, the Freedom of Information Act, and later the False Claims Act environmental cases. Some cases have been straightforward and relatively easy. Others have involved complex statutory schemes, or large administrative records, or convoluted facts, or pro se complaints that need to be deciphered. Many cases have been unremarkable. Others have presented unique issues and other challenges. In all, I sought to achieve a fair and just outcome. The breadth of my experience has resulted in a plethora of responsibilities and titles. However, for me, it's not been about amassing titles or building a resume. It's about doing what I can to contribute to the mission of the office. Working with the attorneys and paralegals on discovery-related matters is one of the most worthwhile aspects of being the Civil Division Discovery Officer. I especially enjoy interacting with our newest attorneys. They all are so bright and hardworking. It also helps that I like conducting discovery. Discovery is critical. It is where we make or lose many of our cases. I've been the Civil Division Senior Litigation Counsel for 2 years now. Translation, I coordinate training and do other duties as assigned. This certainly has presented special challenges. Previously, I was the FOIA coordinator for 20 years. I litigated a number of cases and found FOIA to be the subject area with some of the most fascinating issues, the most entertaining cases, and the most irrational adversaries. I could not have so effectively represented the interests of the United States without the support of my coworkers. My current Civil Chief, Rich Hayes, has been my friend as well as my colleague for many years. He does not want me to talk about him. I will say only that anyone who has worked with him knows that he is an incredibly gifted attorney and a caring person. Rich is my second favorite supervisor. I've had quite a few supervisors, including our Chief of Civil Appeals, Verity Nelson, who still ranks as my favorite supervisor. Her wise counsel has been invaluable. Tom McFarland patiently answered my baby AUSA questions and later supervised me long distance from Central Islip. Charlie Kelly made sure that I did not have to worry about work matters when I needed to take time off to mend my broken arm. Seth Eichenholz is on detail to DC, and Dara Alds is my current deputy chief. I've had the privilege to work with other talented attorneys over the years. These have included the late former Civil Chief Igo Albright, who brought me into the office, the late Nan Miller, who second seated me on my first trial, a nationwide class action before then Chief Judge Sifton, the late Charlie Kleinberg. Okay, please do not think that working with me is fatal. Charlie and I had fun trying a multi-vehicle postal truck accident case. We had less fun during the seemingly endless demanding mediation in which the Navy was a party and we were trying to get money out of Northrop Grumman for environmental cleanup costs. Although that mediation fizzled out with the assistance of the Chief of Environmental Litigation, Matt Silverman, who is still alive, $35 million was recovered from the Navy. A trial that I truly enjoyed was the Zamillo employment discrimination case, which allowed me to work with the two most accomplished trial attorneys in the office, our former Civil Chief, Susan Riley, and my law school classmate, Vince Lafari. And I just want to shout out, because I see some people here who helped me in the early years and continue to. I see Claire Kadeshian, Elliot Shackner, and Dondra Levy, who's no longer with the office, but was a major force in getting into the environmental practice. It's not just attorneys with whom it's not just the attorneys I enjoy working with and who have contributed to my successes. Our former ACE auditor, Emily Rosenthal, she's here, kept me sane and focused during several healthcare fraud investigations, starting with the Visiting Nurse Association case. I'm not afraid of numbers, but Excel is another story. We have a wonderful support staff in the Civil Division. Many of the paralegal specialists and legal assistants who were not even assigned to me have stepped up and provided outstanding support without me even asking. I must give an extremely loud shout out to my current paralegal specialist, the incomparable Janet Rodriguez. She is another person who keeps me sane and on whom I can rely without hesitating. and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my legal assistant, Vanessa Lee. Together, my co-workers and I have persisted through terrorist attacks, storms, transit strikes, government shutdowns, plague, and the blue screen of death. Finally, I would like to thank my husband, Southern District Assistant John Gura, for putting up with me and understanding the demands of the job and why we eat dinner so. In closing, so many have said this before, it seems like a cliche. I've already heard it tonight. Being an AUSA is the best job a lawyer can have. Thank you all very much.
Next recipient is Doug Pravda from the Eastern District.
Doug, you're up.
Doug is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School. Following law school, he clerked for Judge Amalia Kearse for the Second Circuit. He joined the Eastern District in 2011 after a few years in private practice. At the Eastern District, Doug has served in general crimes, international narcotics and money laundering, and national security and the cyber crime sections. Doug has also held a number of significant supervisory roles in the office. He has served as the chief of the national security section since August of 2020, and previously served as deputy chief of that section and as deputy chief of the general crime section. And under his leadership, the national security section has expanded well beyond the traditional terrorism cases that the Eastern District used to bring, and has brought significant prosecutions in areas of critical importance to U.S. national security, including cases involving foreign malign influence, the illicit trafficking of sensitive technologies, cyber exploitation by nation states, and the prosecution of multinational corporations that enable terrorist organizations. And just a couple of cases that highlight Doug's leadership over the last few years. First is the prosecution of the French company Lafarge for material support to terrorists based on the company's payment to ISIS to operate a cement plant in Syria. And Lafarge entered into the first ever corporate guilty plea for material support to terrorists and agreed to pay $778 million as part of the resolution of the matter. Under Doug's leadership, the office prosecuted Chinese government agents who operated a clandestine police station in Lower Manhattan on behalf of the People's Republic of China. There were 5 cases that were brought against more than 20 defendants with various sanctions and export violations for their efforts to secure sensitive U.S. technologies for Russia's use on the battlefield in Ukraine. And over the past 10 years, Doug has personally prosecuted more than 20 members and supporters of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and has secured terrorism convictions in several terrorism trials. He has also personally prosecuted multiple other defendants for terrorism offenses, including 2 men who traveled from Yemen to Afghanistan to join Al-Qaeda and fight against U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And 3 men who tried to attack law enforcement officers on behalf of ISIS, including a defendant who stabbed an FBI agent after law enforcement agents interrupted their plot to conduct a terrorist attack in New York City. The list of the terrorism cases that Doug has worked on is long. Doug has established himself as an inspiring leader, a thought innovator, an exceptional advocate, and a dedicated mentor. His achievements and unwavering commitment to public service represent the finest traditions of the Justice Department and make him a deserving recipient of the Stimson Medal. Please join me in congratulating Doug.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you, Judge Sullivan, for your words. Your inspiring remarks. Thank you to the New York City Bar Association and the Stimson Medal Committee for selecting me for this award. I'm truly honored and humbled to receive it. And of course, congratulations to my fellow award recipients, Katie and Marsha and Christine. So it was especially gratifying to hear the news of my selection from Rich, who almost 14 years ago now interviewed me when I applied for a job in the Eastern District. He was then the criminal chief, and he conducted my interview along with then U.S. Attorney Loretta Lynch and Executive Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Mueller. And after the interview, when Loretta called me to offer me a position, I accepted immediately. And she told me that I had made her day, and I told her that she had made my year. This was truly my dream job, and it was one that I had wanted to do since law school. So thank you, Rich, and thank you, Loretta, for giving me the opportunity to achieve that. Rich is also one of the many U.S. attorneys that I have served under in this job. I won't name them all, possibly more than I can count, but I do want to thank one particular U.S. attorney, Leon Peace, who couldn't be here tonight, but who nominated me for this award, and who has, over the last few years, been incredibly supportive and prioritized the work that we do in the National Security and Cybercrime section. I also want to thank a few other members of the front office, Carolyn Picorni, who is our first assistant U.S. attorney, and Judy Phillips, who is our executive assistant U.S. attorney. When I first joined the office in 2011, Carolyn was my general crimes chief, Judy was my intake chief, and together they trained me and mentored me and had a lot to do with making me into the prosecutor that I am today. So thank you, Carolyn and Judy, for your support then, and thank you for your support now. So since my general crime days, I've come to focus on national security, as you've heard, which has been very meaningful to me to do the important work of keeping the nation safe. I joined the National Security and Cybercrime section at a really interesting time in early 2014 when ISIS was first emerging as a significant national security threat and radicalizing its recruits online. And in that year, and in many years that followed, much of my practice was following every investigative lead from anybody in the Eastern District and outside the Eastern District. Judge Sullivan, 10 years still no problem, who either wanted to travel to Syria to join ISIS or wanted to conduct an attack in the U.S. on behalf of ISIS. And our mission in those years was a simple but critical one: to protect the people of the city of New York, the Eastern District, and the United States from terrorists who would do us harm, whether at home or abroad. That's a mission that continues to this day. And it's one I believe is particularly appropriate to think about right now, since we are on the eve of the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. And one of the things that we try to do in the National Security and Cybercrime section is to ensure that an event like 9/11 never happens again. But that's not an easy task. That mission has only grown and expanded and become more complicated since 2015. Today, it's not the case that we are largely concerned only with international terrorism. New threats to national security are emerging all the time. Domestic terrorism is on the rise. We're seeing counterintelligence threats from hostile foreign states that are trying to interfere with U.S. political discourse, that are trying to steal U.S. intellectual property, and that are trying to unlawfully acquire U.S. manufactured advanced technologies, many of which have military application and therefore wind up on foreign battlefields. And we have cyber actors to exploit vulnerabilities, to steal information, and to disrupt critical infrastructure. So we in the National Security section have tried to meet those challenges by investigating cases, disrupting threats, by bringing charges and by securing convictions in each of those critical areas to protect the American public and to preserve the rule of law. And you heard about some of those in my introduction. And while I'm grateful for your remarks, none of those successes are mine alone. There was a team of AUSAs and agents who did all of that work. And so I wanted to single out a few people to thank who played critical roles in those successes. Seth Duchamp, Chris Tucker, my fellow NSC supervisors over the years, Alex Sullivan, Craig Hewen, Audie McConnell, Alex Minlin, Nick Moscow, the many wonderful and talented AUSAs in the National Security Section who I regret that I don't have time to name. My wonderful trial partners in second suits, and of course the agents and investigators and analysts and paralegals and other support staff at the office who have supported that mission. I will single out one person to name, John Ross, used to be EDNY's supervisory special agent, now retired, but has been critical to the office's success in the national security space for many, many years. And of course, we couldn't accomplish all of the work that we do without the hard work done by the very special FBI special agents and task force officers who work on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, who serve in the FBI's counterintelligence and cyber division, and the other law enforcement partners as well. So everybody I just mentioned is in effect receiving this award as well. So I would be remiss not to give a shout out to my general crime class of 2011, Nathan Wiley, Bob Palomani, Kristen Mays, Nadia Shahada, and Tiana Demas. It was an amazing class. All of us girls to become supervisors in the office, and we really enjoyed each other's company. We were frequent lunch partners. We would go for afternoon coffee. We would sit in each other's offices and talk about our cases and bounce ideas off each other and just generally support each other. And so it was nice to have, a home away from home, the office. And then last, I want to thank my family. My parents are here today. My sister couldn't be here, but they're my biggest supporters. And they encouraged me to pursue what I loved and instilled in me a desire to do public service. My father, who's also a lawyer, would tell stories around the dinner table of his practice, and that had a lot to do with inspiring me to become a lawyer, do what I do. One of the unfortunate things about practicing in national security is that with all the classified information and with all the non-public investigation, I can't talk at home about the work that I do every day. And so I don't tell my kids the same stories about my day that my father told me when I was growing up. And in fact, I share so little with them about what I do that my son, who's sitting in the back, sometimes jokes that I'm unemployed. So I think the ceremony might convince him otherwise. But seriously, thank you very much to my wife and my kids. Working in the national security practice, and especially a practice that responds to terrorism threats, means that there are a lot of times when I'm doing something with them, there's nights, there's weekends, there's vacation, when I might be called away to respond to something. And so I appreciate them for understanding when that happens. My kids inspire me every day. I'm really proud of them. And I could not do this job without the support of my wife, who is herself a public servant, and who has always been there for me and for our family. So thank you for everything.
Turning now to the Southern District, our next recipient is Christine Schessler-Pascablo. Christine is a graduate of Georgetown University and Fordham Law School, and following law school, Christine clerked for Judge John Bissell in the Federal District Court in New Jersey. She joined the Southern District in 2011 after a few years in private practice. And since joining the Southern District, Christine has handled a heavy docket of wide range of defensive and affirmative cases. She has excelled at defending the government's interest in complex and sensitive litigation, and pursuing entities and individuals that have defrauded the United States government, harmed our environment, and violated civil rights laws. And I want to highlight a few examples of Christine's work. Christine brought a case that resulted in a $49 million settlement with Eastman Kodak to clean up the Eastman Business Park and the Genesee River, plus another $2.75 million for environmental cleanup in New Jersey. She was able to secure a $33 million settlement from Magnesium Corporation of America and Renco Metals, the cleanup of hazardous substances at the U.S. Magnesium Superfund site in Utah. Universal jurisdiction of the Southern District document. And in 2022, she led a team of AUSAs that filed a lawsuit against Meta Platforms for violating the Fair Housing Act by offering targeted options for housing advertisements that discriminated against Facebook users based on their race, color, religion, and other characteristics. And in a settlement of that case, Meta agreed to stop using a delivery tool that relied on discriminatory algorithms and agreed to develop a new system to address disparities in the delivery of housing ads. On top of that, the Southern District's civil rights practice that Christine has been involved with for many years includes a large volume of complaints concerning the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Christine has handled both and supervised the investigations and resolutions of numerous of these complaints. And that work includes a successful lawsuit against the architects and the builders of the condominium in Mount Kisco in Westchester that was billed as a 55 and older community and advertised as ADA compliant when in fact it was not. Earlier this year, Christine was promoted to the position of Deputy Chief of Southern District's Civil Division, where she supervises and trains 15 AUSAs, handling the office's large and varied defensive docket. Throughout her career, Christine has been the consummate AUSA, committed to doing the right thing for the right reasons, and expertly representing the interests of the United States. Through her work, she has established valuable legal precedent, protected our environment and the civil rights of individuals, established important working relationships with federal and state and city agencies, and mentored dozens of AUSAs. For all of these reasons, Christine is a worthy recipient of the Henry L. Stimson Medal. Please join me in congratulating her.
To the New York City Bar for this honor, and to Pillsbury Winthrop for making this award possible every year. And I also want to thank Judge Sullivan, who I appeared before in the district court as a very new AUSA. I remember him being the perfect combination of exacting but kind, which assured me that being an AUSA charged with doing what is fair and just in cases before judges intent on doing the same was the right job for me. Ever since I can remember, I was constantly aware of when someone was treated unfairly, or when an injustice was overlooked because someone could not advocate for themselves, or when things in the world around me just didn't seem equitable. I would pepper my parents with questions like, why doesn't Santa give more gifts to the kids who don't have as much? Why hasn't a woman been president, the Pope, a starting pitcher for the Yankees? Why did my classmate get in trouble for something he didn't do? Why are there people sleeping on the streets of New York City when there are so many buildings? The questions continued and became bigger, stuck with me. A laid-back child, I was not. So I knew I had to do something to try, in any way I could, to right the wrongs I saw around me. As I learned more about the government in high school and college, I was drawn to the ideals of the American justice system. A fair process, giving both sides a chance to be heard by an impartial decision maker, justice, accessible for all. And I knew that was a system I could work in, so off to law school I went. Of course, I also quickly learned that the system does not always operate as intended. And we are now living in a time when the system itself is being attacked, when the impartiality of jurists has been called into question, when politics seems to be interfering with the objective application of the law to the facts. So it is more important than ever for us, as government lawyers, to do our part to ensure that people who come into contact with our office feel that they have been heard and that they have been given a fair shot. As AUSAs, we have an opportunity to do that in big and small ways, all the work we do. Through my work in the Civil Rights Unit, I have seen firsthand how we can bring a measure of fairness to victims of civil rights violations. For example, we have ensured that college students with mobility impairment can access the same dorms as their classmates, and children who are neurodivergent or who have diabetes can be accommodated at the same summer camp as their friends. We made sure that a female firefighter who was harassed by her male supervisor and pushed out of her job was compensated, and that the fire department implemented policies to prevent that from ever happening again. We required one of the largest social media platforms in the country to stop perpetuating race and gender discrimination in the delivery of housing act. And we ensured that local drug treatment courts are available to every eligible applicant, including English language learners, by requiring translated materials and interpreters. The AUSAs handling each of these cases secured the relief that the law required, but also brought the victims peace of mind, knowing that they were seen and heard, and that their complaints were finally handled fairly. But we can also promote fairness simply by the way we work, how we interact with client agencies, adversaries, the court, and colleagues. Sometimes that means consenting to a pro se amending a complaint for the third time, or admitting that a federal employee made a mistake and settling a case quickly, or hearing an adversary out and making a real effort to understand their perspective as we determine how to handle a case, or simply by being kind. I've learned over the years that you can stand firm when you know your position is correct, and zealously advocate, and win, but you can do all that with grace and kindness. That is what will let people know that we are striving to make sure the justice system we are part of lives up to its ideals and is meant for everyone. As I reflect back on the work I have done so far, it is not the motions or appeals I prevailed on, or even the civil rights victories that have made me feel successful in this job. Instead, here's the type of thing that has kept me going. Just a few months into being an AUSA, I was assigned a student loan discharge case. The debtor owed over $60,000, much of which was interest due to his inability to keep up with payments because of medical expenses and limited salary as an adjunct professor. I worked with debtor's counsel and the Department of Education over many months to reach a resolution requiring the debtor to pay back only the remaining principal on a monthly schedule he could afford. After the case was resolved, the debtor's counsel sent to me the following email. I would like to thank you for the time and courtesy you exhibited in this case. It's been a pleasure working with you. I know to many people that would seem like simple courtesies, but to me, as someone who was sympathetic to the debtor's plight, but representing a client agency that wanted full payment to which the law entitled them, achieving a result that allowed the government to recover, that allowed the debtor to move forward, and have opposing counsel thank me for how I handled the case, that made me feel like I was doing something. And that email continues to remind me that what sticks with people is how you treat them. Now, I just want to thank some of the many people who have given me the opportunity to do this work. First, to Preet Bharara for hiring me and for instilling his generation of AUSAs with the knowledge that the Civil Division was meant both to honorably defend the United States interests and to be a mighty affirmative force for good. Yoon Kim, Jeff Berman, and Audrey Strauss, who worked so hard to ensure our office could continue to do good work even in the most challenging of times. Damian Williams for nominating me for this award and promoting me to the position of Deputy Chief, who's given me the privilege of working with a group of tremendous AUSAs who work so hard every day to be fair. My Civil Division Chiefs, Deputy Chiefs, and Civil Rights Co-Chiefs, Andrew, Sarah, Jeff, Neil, Sarah, Laura, David, and Ellen, most of whom are here tonight, so thank you for being here. I cannot think of a better group of lawyers and people to learn from. Each of you taught me in different but equally important ways how to be a better lawyer and a supportive colleague. And the opportunities and guidance you gave me are the reason I'm up here today. The AUSAs I started with, I still feel like we're the new kids. Thank you for being sources of strength and support as we navigated so many challenges together, both professional and personal, and still listening to my stories from the office that only sensitive AUSAs would appreciate, even after you left. And a quick shout out to my colleague, Jeanette Vargas, who was just confirmed to be the newest judge in the SBY. And finally, to my family. I want to thank my sister Karen, who is here and happens to share a birthday with Henry Stimson. And my brother Stephen, who's in California. They made me a middle child, so if you believe the stereotype, they are primarily responsible for my quest for fairness. They have always supported and celebrated my work, and especially during this past year, as we have faced challenges of aging parents much sooner than we expected, my sister has taken on more than her fair share, which has allowed me to keep doing this important work. I wish my parents could be here tonight because I would not be in a position to receive this recognition, but for the countless ways they have supported me. They knew I was going to be a lawyer since I was in 5th grade when I declared on my All About Me poster that I wanted to either be a judge or a Major League Baseball player. Their belief in me and my goals has been unwavering. I know they are proud. Finally, I want to thank my husband, Ryan, and my children, Sebastian, Alex, and Grace. My kids can now point out ADA violations around the neighborhood. They share my outrage at unfairness, even if it's usually about who sat in the middle on the last car trip. And they appreciate that when I'm running around trying to juggle it all, it is because it's important to me to be there for them, but also to work in a job that allows me to try to make a difference. And to my husband, thank you for somehow getting every judge and courtroom deputy you appeared before as a criminal AUSA to love you. So when I later appeared before them, I could honestly answer, are you related to Ryan Piscablo? And thank you for always believing in me, sometimes more than I believed in myself. Back in 2002, Ryan gave me a Black's Law Dictionary as a gift. Yes, we are nerds. And inscribed it with a message that indicated he thought we would still be discussing the law together in our 80s, which was really presumptuous since we'd only been dating for a year. But now I know you're right, and I'm so grateful for all the discussions we've had since then and look forward to all that is to come. I want to end with sharing a phrase that our Civil Division Chief, Jeff Ostreicher, uses to sign off on his weekly shout-out emails. Please continue to take care of each other. That is the most fundamental principle of fairness. Take care of someone is to treat them with respect, to try to understand their story, to see them as an equal. I'm grateful to have a job where that is valued above all else. Thank you.
Last recipient of the medal is Marcia Cohen from the Southern District. Marcia is a graduate of Brown University and Harvard Law School, and after law school she clerked with Judge Deary in the Eastern District. We encouraged her to consider working as a federal prosecutor. There was a short stint in private practice, and ultimately she joined the Southern District's Criminal Division in 1998. In her early years, she prosecuted cases involving violence and drug trafficking, and in 2004, she left Manhattan for the White Plains Division, where she initially investigated and prosecuted a variety of complex fraud matters. But over the last 20 years, she has dedicated herself to prosecuting individuals who sexually exploit children. She advocates strongly in court, while also being empathetic to the victims and their families under the most trying of circumstances. He has investigated and prosecuted hundreds of cases of sexual exploitation of children and has assisted, trained, guided, and mentored junior prosecutors in investigating and prosecuting countless more cases. I'll highlight just 3 examples of her work over the last 20 years. United States versus Leland Robinson, where the defendant targeted a 14-year-old boy he met on Snapchat. Garcia helped the victim find the courage to testify, even after it became clear that the defendant was going to appear pro se at the trial, would be conducting the cross-examination of the victim himself. After a jury trial in 2023, in which the victim provided powerful testimony, the defendant was convicted and sentenced to 50 years imprisonment. United States versus Richard Denizo. In that case, Marcia prosecuted a defendant who had abused at least 7 girls between the ages of 4 and 10, videotaped the abuse, and then distributed the videos to other child abusers via the internet. Following the defendant's guilty plea in that case, he was sentenced to 600 months imprisonment. United States versus John Musser, where Marcia prosecuted a teacher in an elite New York City school for abusing a student who he was tutoring outside of the school. When the investigation revealed that the defendant had abused other children decades before, and there was no federal criminal charge available for the prior abuses, Marcia fashioned a guilty plea in which the defendant admitted both the prior and the recent crimes, for which he was ultimately sentenced to 25 years imprisonment. He's a 26-year veteran of the Southern District, tireless investigator, an exceptional prosecutor, a generous mentor, and a great colleague. Exemplifies the qualities, integrity, fairness, dedication to public service, and as such, she is a truly deserving recipient of this medal. Please join me in congratulating Marcia.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. Thank you to the Stimson Committee and the New York City Bar Association. And thank you, Judge Sullivan, not only for your very thoughtful words today, but also for being my general crimes chief and later my narcotics chief. You led us by example with your integrity, your incredible work ethic, and your commitment to justice. And you were very patient. I know I tested that patience from time to time. It is such an honor to receive this award. I want to congratulate tonight's other honorees. It's a privilege to be here with you. For as long as I've been in the office, I've admired the recipients of this award. And every year when the winners have been announced, I felt so grateful to work in an office in which the traits that the medal honors are so valued. Many of the prior recipients are my role models and my friends. What an honor to be in their company. I didn't plan to be a prosecutor. During college, I spent a summer working as a criminal investigator for the Public Defender Service in DC. And there I found lawyers who were passionate about the principles and the promises of the criminal justice system, and who were committed to providing effective representation to indigent criminal defendants. After that summer, I went back to college with a goal to one day return to that office as a public defender. That remained my goal throughout law school. And then after law school, I clerked for Judge Raymond J. Deary in the Eastern District. And he suggested that I think about applying to become an AUSA. He said the U.S. Attorney's Office was a place for people with compassion for criminal defendants and with a commitment to protecting defendants' rights. Over the course of that year, as I watched Eastern District AUSAs in action, I realized he was right, and that as a prosecutor, I would have discretion to help ensure that justice was served. I wouldn't be here without Judge Deary. Thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. There are others I'd like to thank. My mom and dad, who are here tonight, have been there for me always. Let me just say, I wasn't an especially easy kid. My mom is trying as hard as she can not to nod her head right now. Thank you for helping me find my way. We didn't have any lawyers in my family, but my dad is kind of a wannabe lawyer. So when I was in law school, he listened to all the recordings of Irving Younger's lectures on the rules of evidence so that he could discuss them with me. I'm pretty sure that my dad credits himself with my understanding of hearsay. If anyone here has any questions about hearsay or wants to discuss the rules of evidence, I know that my dad would be happy to talk to you. I'm so grateful to my husband, Mark Hotchkiss, who is my partner in life and my constant supporter. If they gave out Stimson medals to kidney doctors, he would get one, because he is the kindest and most honorable person I know. I'm also grateful to my amazing kids. Emma, who is 21, and I think skipped a biology lab to be here tonight. And Jonah, who's 19 and couldn't be here because he just began his freshman year at the University of Vermont. They ground me and challenge me. Having a federal prosecutor as a mom, especially one who spends her days focused on crimes against children, was probably not always so easy for them. I think they would say that I asked them a lot of questions. And then there is my Southern District New York family, my SDNY family, made up of current and former members of the office. It truly is a family, and I am so lucky to be part of it. My general crimes class, my second seats and mentors, my trial partners, my chiefs, my fellow White Plainsers, the support staff, paralegals, and all the others who work quietly in the background. Thank you for always having my back. Thank you for your friendship. Special shout out to Perry Carbone and Marjorie Feinzig, with whom I've worked for more than 20 years. Your wisdom, kindness, and friendship means more than I can say. And another special thank you to our U.S. Attorney, Damian Williams, our Deputy U.S. Attorney, Ed Kim, and our Criminal Division Chief, Dan Gittner. Thank you for prioritizing crimes against children and for your unwavering support of me and the values that our office holds dear. Investigating and prosecuting crimes against children is challenging. The conduct is abhorrent, the victims and their families are shattered, and the defendants themselves are often the product of heartbreaking circumstances. The federal penalties are severe, often with significant mandatory minimum sentences. Charging decisions are hard, and sentences, even when there's no question that justice has been served and that our world has been made a little safer for our children, are often quite sad. And yet I feel so lucky to do the work I do. The reason for that is threefold. First, because I work in an office that recognizes that the decisions we make are not easy and that we must exercise our discretion well and fairly. We grapple a lot, not just with which cases to take, but with how to charge them, how to resolve them, and what positions to take at sentencing. It's usually not about whether we can do something, it's about whether we should. The second reason I feel so lucky to do this work is because of the special agents and task force officers I am so proud to work alongside of. They are incredible investigators, and they are tireless in their pursuit of justice. They are also kind and compassionate. They understand what victims and their families are going through, and they do everything they can to support them. This medal is given to me, but really I see it as a tribute to all of us who work these cases. And finally, and most importantly, I'm so grateful to do the work I do because of the victims. One of the things I learned early on is that in general, kids don't tell when something bad happens to them. There are many reasons they don't tell. Because it's embarrassing, because they think they'll get in trouble, because they think it's their fault, because they think they can handle it themselves, and the list goes on. And the fact is that people who prey on children are really good at finding kids who are especially vulnerable and even less likely to tell. So what does that mean? It means that the ones who do come forward are incredibly courageous, and we must do everything we can to support them. I think about their bravery a lot because it inspires those of us who do this work to do it as well as we possibly can. I think about the trial I had with a boy who was 14 years old when the abuse occurred and had just turned 18 years old when the case went to trial. And when he was cross-examined by the pro se defendant, his abuser, about why he didn't immediately report what had happened, he said, for a 14-year-old to go through that, it's a little tough. You're going to keep a lot of it to yourself. And it takes a long time for yourself to come to terms with what actually happened. And you must live with the regret and the denial. I think about the 15-year-old in one of my cases who wrote in a letter to the court at sentencing that she is so much stronger now than she was at the time of the defendant's arrest. She told the judge, wouldn't even recognize me now. And I think about the 14-year-old in another case who spoke at sentencing and told the defendant, you don't get the satisfaction of weighing me down anymore. I will continue to be strong each day. I can't bear the idea of this happening to someone else. A few years ago, we had a case involving a defendant who had been sexually exploiting 12 and 13-year-olds online. When he was arrested and charged, his wife was 8.5 months pregnant with their first child, and she was convinced that we had it all wrong. But by the time we got to the sentencing, she asked the court to impose the maximum sentence on her now ex-husband. At the sentencing proceeding, she thanked the victims, and she told them that she owes everything she has to them. Said that because of their courage, her baby girl will grow up in a house in which she is safe. And she said, I stand with the victims today and every day. Those are the moments that make me so grateful for what we get to do. Grateful that we get to stand with the victims every day. Thank you again for this incredible honor.
Now you know why this award is so well deserved. Just some brief closing comments. We wish to note that the standard of excellence, integrity, and public service celebrated here tonight do not just happen. They require constant attention, effort, and at times courage. Today, more than in most ages, protecting the rule of law and our fundamental legal institutions and traditions is critical to our American system of government. For those of you who have answered the call to public service, thank you. With that, we conclude the Stimson Medal ceremony. We want to express our appreciation to the City Bar and staff for making this ceremony possible. We also want to thank all of you coming here tonight. Hope that you will join us across the hallway to continue the celebration.